Welcome to another episode of Four Guys Talking About AI. I got my three buddies here, Greg Sterling, John Gerard, and Neil Polachek. What's up, guys?
Howdy.
How's it going?
Hey. All right, another big week here in the world of AI. This week we're looking at what happens when AI starts reshuffling the power structure in careers, companies, and even in the internet itself. First, we're seeing a phenomenon that we're calling the leapfrogging effect, where junior developers and designers who adopt the newest AI tools are suddenly outperforming people with years more experience. And the skills hierarchy is shifting fast. The AI world is compressing the learning curve in a way that we've never seen before. And you've got a bunch of people who are newer in their career who are leapfrogging these people who are older in their career. And fascinating kind of concept that's happening there. So we'll dig into that. At the same time, there's a growing AI trust backlash. OpenAI this week has taken heat for jumping into government defense contracts, while Anthropic publicly pushed back on military AI use of surveillance and drones. And the result is essentially a hit to ChatGPT's brand. And there's a new feature from Anthropic that lets users migrate their memory from ChatGPT to Claude in a single step. So we're seeing some interesting changes in how people are using some of these tools. Meanwhile, there's a entirely new AI battleground emerging in a place that you might not expect in home renovation and home services. With $500 billion market and more than 2.5 million businesses in the US alone, over 400 AI startups are now racing to become the new assistant that manages your home projects, connects you with contractors, and controls billions in spending. So we'll jump into that a little bit. And then finally, a glimpse of what the future might look like, where Google has a new patent suggesting that the company could replace poorly performing websites with AI-generated pages of their own, effectively rewriting the way that web users respond to queries and what that customer experience is. So let's jump into it, y'all. AI isn't just changing the tools, it's reshaping who wins and gets trusted. At the top of our agenda here is this leapfrogging effect, where junior developers and designers and even engineers are getting leapfrogged by people who are newer in their careers. John, you wanna jump in on this one and share some of your experience with that?
Yeah, I think this is sort of a new thing. I'm sure it's been going on to some degree all along here, but it's funny. It's sort of popped for me in a bunch of conversations just in the last few weeks. And the phenomenon is essentially that the people who are at the sort of most senior levels in a bunch of areas, so designers and developers, actually, frankly, this is probably happening with lawyers as well. Are kind of getting leapfrogged in terms of capabilities and output by much more junior people, in some cases by amateurs that are leveraging or relying very heavily on AI tools. And it's this funny phenomenon where I think what is that quote about, like, first they ignore you, then they laugh at you, then they fight you, then you win?
Yeah, the Kierkegaard. Yeah.
I think we've just transitioned from they ignore you to they laugh at you. Like, that's kind of what's happening with the more senior folks. And so there's this really funny thing where there's a dismissiveness. I think it's now starting to be driven partly by fear. Like, this is scary and I don't want to look at the thing that everybody says is going to disrupt my livelihood. And it's really profound. There's a lot of folks at the more senior levels who have fallen very, very far behind. And at the pace that things are changing, you can imagine that for some of them, that's going to be a fatal falling behind, that they may not ever quite catch up. So it's weird. Again, it's happened across half a dozen or more conversations just in the last couple of weeks across, many different functions. And I think it's a pretty profound thing that's unfolding.
John, I have a lawyer friend who I interviewed about a year ago about their use of AI, and he was like pretty dismissive. Told me a week ago that one of his main associate is all over this stuff. They're now going to aggressively adopt some AI tools. A tool that in particular, my friend said, during a deposition will go back and tell you what questions to ask the person being deposed based on their prior I mean, really intelligent stuff.
Yeah.
And so my friend who's more my age and the associate is really driving all this inside the little law firm. So exactly the kind of thing you're talking about, but
Yep.
not technology, but in sort of what I'd call in the real world stuff of how to use this stuff. So I bet a lot of that's going on.
You see it a lot also at the university level too, I would say. I mean, that some universities are early adopters of this, but I also think that there's a lot of pushback at the professor level with this, saying that, AI is, infringing on, and, there's just cause for, brain mush, to happen with, professors want students to learn and not just use AI to just cheat or get the answers and check the box to say I did my homework, but they didn't actually learn anything. So there
Yeah.
is a very valid argument on that side of the equation. But at the same time, I also see that at the university level that AI is not a lot of courses aren't being offered right now because a lot of those professors are kind of like, it's not my bag, or they feel threatened by it. So so in some schools you're having to look for resources and ways to be able to learn.
I wanted to just add on to that. I'm glad you mentioned that. So I was up at Stanford visiting my son for family weekend. He's a senior there. And I've been kind of tracking how this is unfolding there, arguably the epicenter of Silicon Valley and a lot of the stuff that's going on. And I had this crazy conversation with him and some of his friends over dinner where I was saying, well, now, so how much are you guys using these tools? And it became very apparent very quickly that I actually knew quite a bit more about various of these tools than they did. Now they understand like how to build an LLM, or at least some of them do. But in terms of the practical application of this to problem solving, and how it kind of works in the real world, like there is so much allergy among the academics and the professors to applying applied AI, that these kids are not getting exposed to the ways that you might use these tools. And in fact, the most funny part was I told them about all the stuff that I was doing, and each one of them, there were 3 of them, said, "Oh my God, my dad's vibe coding too." Like, so like all the dads, the generation above is like full on adopting, and then the kids themselves, like, very little applied AI going on.
I mean, this is a slightly different point, but I hear anecdotally from my younger daughter, who's a junior in college, that there's a lot of ambivalence among people about using AI because of the environmental impact, because of other concerns that they have. She uses it selectively. A professor of hers accused her of cheating with AI on a I guess it was a report, because he thought it was too good. And she said, "There's no way that I used it." And she's now in some like discussion about trying to prove that she didn't use AI. That's a different point. She said this guy is really paranoid about AI, but that's a different conversation.
Because the business model of higher education is going to be at risk. It's going to be disrupted. That's why there's so much pushback, I think. I mean,
yeah, you're probably right.
And also, if you're publishing, if you're a professor who also publishes, and you've gotten your content ripped off, there's also a very valid position, from that perspective. And
publish or perish, right? The old,
Right.
And now what's publish mean? Does it mean I have this thing help me write it? I mean, there's going to be mass upheaval in secondary education, in my opinion. Mass.
Yeah. Let's move on to the next topic here. Big week with Anthropic getting the big, very significant boot from government contracts. They rejected the idea of surveillance on U.S. citizens, and also the concept of AI creating decisions for drones to act on their own. And
autonomous killing.
autonomous killing, right? Specifically. And And that pushback was enough for the DoD to kick them out of all government contracts, and OpenAI just swooped right in, and Sam Altman said, "I'll take those contracts." And even Sam Altman said it wasn't a good look for OpenAI to be as opportunistic in that, but they took a big brand hit this week from that, and Anthropic, being the smart company that they are, created a simple prompt for you to be able to move all of your memory from ChatGPT over to Claude. And fascinating moves here. And we've talked a lot about it on the podcast about how there are very low switching costs in this moment. So, Greg, what are some of your thoughts on this?
Well, I mean, it's interesting on multiple levels. One is the kind of whole issue of consumer trust and AI. And another is just sort of brand identity and how that's playing out, in this kind of quasi commodity sector. Because if all of these things, there are low switching costs, and you can move your history easily into another tool, then where's the moat, right? And to some degree, that's the brand. I mean, there was a study that talked about the first AI that you use tends to be the one you're loyal to. That was based on some survey data, and it's certainly true with me. I mean, ChatGPT is the tool that I'm most familiar with. It's the tool that I use the most, even though I use Gemini and Claude and Grok to a lesser degree, and Perplexity. But what's going on with ChatGPT's brand is really fascinating, because they have owned the brand in the generative AI space, and it has taken a hit in this episode around the negotiations with the Defense Department. Anthropic has presented itself as a more ethical company, and by sort of sliding in the wake of that dispute, OpenAI seems like the slimy, sleazy company that's just concerned about revenue and nothing else. Even though Sam Altman says, "Oh, that's not true, and we have the same guardrails." But what that did is it sparked two things: a huge spike in Claude downloads. It became number one in the iTunes App Store, not iTunes, but iOS App Store. And then there's this whole kind of canceled ChatGPT movement going on that seems to have resulted in a couple of million, or maybe up to 3 million, cancellations of the paid product, and an abandonment of ChatGPT.
I mean, how many are paying today? Isn't it half?
It's public. It's public. It's a meaningful number. It's not. It's a minority, but it's a meaningful number. That's where they're.
3 million is a small percentage, isn't it?
Yeah, they claim to have something like 900 million users, so 3 million is small.
It's like
The brand perception is really a critical thing for them, and if they become known as the unethical AI, that's problematic for them in the long term.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
just quickly by analogy. So Target, when Trump got into office, he said, "You got to cancel all your DEI programs, everybody," and most people did it. And Target was one that did it. And then Target had some problems with ICE in Minneapolis, where they're based, where they were kind of seen to be accepting of certain kinds of ICE activities that were disapproved by others. And Target has really suffered as a result of that decision, both in terms of market capitalization and in terms of revenue. Quarter over quarter losses, market capitalization is down, and their CEO is gone as a result of that.
Wow.
So this is not just about Target. Target has all kinds of explanations for what happened. It's not just about Target kind of not having the right mix of products or experience in the store. It's about consumers expressing disapproval of behavior by a company. And so there is some risk here for ChatGPT, because when you have an alternative which is as good, or maybe better in some respects, in the form of Claude, and certainly the lazy alternative Gemini, ChatGPT is at risk. And I think they got to clean up the mess.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I hear you, and yet I think about Google. Oh, Google's now, they went from good to evil, and there seems to be no disruption in usage of Google. I mean,
That's a different case, but I mean, Google is a monopoly that that's a long debate that we don't need to have right now. Yes, you're right. It's a fair point.
And I mean, with 900 million users, 3 million sort of going off your platform, I don't think that's probably keeping them up at night as much as how do they meet their revenue expectations against their massive valuation. And the Department of Defense has $13 billion of spend sitting out there, and it's not surprising.
Yeah, and in fact, Anthropic is sort of back at the bargaining table with the Department of Defense.
There you
It's
go.
also, yeah, it's also, I mean, there's some speculation as this was unfolding too, that this was kind of Sam Altman showing his colors a little bit. And, he's sort of widely viewed as nice as he shows up, as very, very political and maybe even a little bit sneaky. And, part of what unfolded here was him publicly saying, hey, we need guardrails. This is really a problem, appearing to take a hard line. Anthropic joining that hard line while OpenAI was actually negotiating the deal behind the scenes, right? And maybe that's just good, like political
realpolitik.
Yeah, exactly. But it is interesting, and if you think about, like you were saying, in terms of the brand hits here, the bad boy brand is already taken. That's Grok, right? They already got that. The ethical brand appears to be Anthropic. Like, the one you don't want is the slimy one, right? Like, and it's not even unethical. It's just the one that kind of makes you feel gross. And that may be what ChatGPT or what OpenAI is bringing on themselves.
Another quick example is Twitter. What happened to Twitter, right? So there are issues around Musk and Twitter. Twitter is flatlining as a business. Ad revenue, usage, everything. And so this is, at least in some way, these things matter, these choices, and whether you're ethical or not ethical does matter to some percentage of people.
ChatGPT has 900 million weekly users. They've got 50 million paying subscribers. So it's 5 to 6% of that audience that's paying. And then this week, there's a report that indicates that 1.5 million paying subscribers canceled within 48 hours. Greg, you said 3 million.
So, well, I don't know if that's paying subscribe. I saw that number somewhere, so it's unreliable. But
yeah, so they're, whether it's somewhere in that range, but let's say it's 1.5 million, it's a substantial percentage to have that number turn out overnight. I mean, in 1 week, that's quite a dramatic push. And to me, what that shows is exactly what you're saying, Greg, is this is kind of like sensitivity to and lack of loyalty necessarily to a particular platform. So if people can just jump out and say, hey, you know what, I'm going to use that prompt, I'm going to go over to Anthropic or Claude, and just buy ChatGPT overnight like that, it really shows the kind of risk and the lack of moat that does exist there.
One of the questions I have is, if you take your history, does it learn your history and then start to help you? Because I know I watch my wife on this thing, and she's got all these threads in there about really sensitive stuff. You flip it over to Perplexity or Anthropic. Does
Anthropic.
It learn all that stuff? Does it learn all?
Presumably, that's the point.
Presumably it does. But one thing about Anthropic that I personally like is that their policy is that they don't train their model on your data. They keep your data separate from the model.
Another ethical position.
Yeah,
Sort of
exactly.
Apple.
This is the Apple. They're the Apple of the of the AI space. Is kind of where they're taking their brand, and I think it's a really smart move. It's much different from ChatGPT is being very opportunistic in this moment.
Well, so Neil, to your point about 900 million versus so just real quickly, Andy, I found there's a website that's allegedly tracking the boycott. It said that more than 2.5 million have already left ChatGPT. So that's some mix of paid and unpaid people probably. But the real risk is not that all their existing subscriptions are going to go away, I don't think, because those people are bought in and invested. I think the risk is that they won't be able to grow that subscriber base, right? People will just say, like, I don't want to do business with these guys. I'm going to go over here to this equally functional alternative that I perceive to be more credible, ethical, more privacy sensitive, whatever the values are, right? That's the real risk for them.
Well, especially if Anthropic doubled downs on this whole concept of trust and your data is secure and we don't train on your data, that kind of messaging, just in the same way that Apple has done their whole, over the past couple decades. That's how they've won a lot of loyalty amongst their customers. So really interesting moment in time here with all of that. Let's shift gears here a little bit and talk about this new AI battleground that's emerging, in a place they might not expect, which is home renovation and home services. Neil, you wanna talk about your insights on that one?
What triggered this is I was at the mall and I got back to my car and there was this postcard from hijenny.ai and it talked about we'll help you do your remodeling. I live in a nice county, so they obviously targeted the mall because they know there's a fair amount of disposable income. And so I went to see what it was. And it was essentially the next generation of these lead, marketplaces where you connect the homeowner with the contractor, but now with AI tools and with intelligence behind it. And you can scan your room that you want to fix and scan your maybe it's a roof leak that you might be able to scan. So, it's taking that experience that was decent in the prior decades and spent lots of money spent trying to do that, Angie and Home Advisor and all those places, right? And trying to push it into this generation of AI.
Yeah.
And I suspect there's going to be a lot of money spent. It's a $500 billion spend per year in the US, home remodeling, home services stuff. So, and there are a lot of established companies that are partly in that today. House, which, a lot of people have used to look at, what tiles I should put in my kitchen or whatever. They're going to be in that space. It's going to get very competitive very quickly, I think.
Yeah.
In a sense, this recapitulates the SaaS versus AI discussion because you've got a generation of providers, marketplaces, and you've got this new kind of easier to use functionality. And the real challenge for the Hi Jenny 2.0 versions of everything is building awareness and getting the advertiser, right? So they've got to build a new marketplace. They can buy a database of providers,
Factors, right?
right? So
Sure.
they can buy data so you can find business listings, but in order to get revenue, they're going to have to build usage and they're going to have to do some sort of outreach to get advertisers or lead gen or whatever, people who are willing to pay them.
Let's think about the economics of that this time around, right?
Much
Maybe the
cheaper.
economics of building the platform are, a tenth or a quarter of what
Right.
the platform would have been built for before. And the outreach to the contractors and to sort of sweep them into your marketplace might be considerably less too, because of the economics associated with AI tools and reach out and all that stuff. So they can potentially build this thing for 10 cents on the dollar, what it used to get built for, maybe 25 cents on the dollar. And so now a contractor looking at a $50, lead now might be able to get a $10 lead,
Right. That's an acquisition strategy for sure.
Yeah, I mean, so the question is so how does AI disrupt this larger space? Because there's been a lot of businesses, Angie's List, and then Thumbtack, and all these sort of home services, and there's so many interesting elements intertwined here. One of them is, there's a lot of evidence that it's the plumbers, electricians, contractors, gardeners, landscapers that are going to be a little more protected from AI disruption, and so there's sort of this move towards trade. And now here's the way that the AI leaders sort of capitalize on AI. And what I find really interesting. So there's in any business in this space in particular, there's the go to market. How do you get more people? You got a postcard at the mall. The other one is service delivery. And so it sounds like that this initial push is old school go to market, new school service delivery. Like we're gonna put this together with lots of AI stuff, scan your room, find exactly the right people, competitive bidding handled by an agent. And that's interesting. I suspect that that's something that everybody in the space is working on. Thumbtack, Angie's List, House, et cetera. What I'm equally interested, or maybe more, is how people are starting to use AI-based go-to-market. So the example you could think of in this case would be somebody's, I'm sure, thinking about this, discovered that like there are no new ideas. You take Google Street View, you take your house, Neil, in Google Street View, you use AI to re-landscape the whole thing, and you send you an email saying, would you like your yard to look like this?
Right.
And you can do that with an agent for every, you can canvas an entire neighborhood. And do you think you get, leads generated from that kind of outreach? You definitely do. Like, so that's also coming.
We haven't painted our house in 13 years. Guess what? Somebody sends me an image of our house repainted in a different schematic. I'm like, yeah, come on over.
Yeah.
Give me and they'll give me an estimate too.
Yeah.
It won't be that hard to estimate it.
Right.
And the delivery mechanism isn't going to be a piece of mail in your mail. It's going to be a text message to you, because there's you connect the data, points on that one too. So they already know your phone number. So, the delivery of that, which has been a big cost, like that's been a big part of the customer acquisition cost, is, sending out all these 50 cent or, 70% direct mail pieces.
Kind of in personalization, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And by the way, there's now a Ferrari in your driveway too, right?
When you get your house painted, it'll be a pathway to the Ferrari.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, so I'm looking at some data that estimates, so Google makes tons of money from local services ads, the ads that now appear at the top of many, many categories of search results that have pictures and reviews and have a lot of information there, and they're very effective. Consumers click on them, they generate a lot of leads. It's like between $30 and $100 based on one estimate per lead for these, depending on the subcategory. So there's lots of money here that could be undercut. If you're paying Google $100 a lead, depending on your market and your subvertical, somebody comes in and says, we're going to charge you, $10 a lead or $15 a lead. That's a pretty compelling proposition, because it's entirely lead based. There's no impression fee or click fee or anything like that. So
Yeah.
And the ROI on that, they only need, my house.
One job.
Yeah, one job. It's like,
well, it's a per lead thing.
Yeah,
right. So,
so-
it's, there's no, right.
They charge a lot more for that lead than $10.
Right. So there's a pretty cool travel site called Mind Trip, that's AI based. And they have a lot of interesting features and content. And, the struggle for all of these guys that may have a really cool, useful site is just breaking through the noise, right? And so when House and Google and Thumbtack and Angie and Home Advisor are the same company essentially, and all these other people who have, to varying degrees, better known brands do a version of this, it's going to be difficult for the High Jennies of the world to break through unless they have some, unless they're really fast and have a pretty compelling proposition.
And their build out costs may have been a fraction of what, Angie's got a lot of embedded costs. All those guys have much bigger.
Well, and they don't want to cannibalize themselves. They don't want to they don't want to lower their lead costs.
Right.
Their lead. Right.
So the broader dynamic is, we've talked about this a bunch on the podcast here, but that this whole buyer journey is collapsing. The whole steps from discovery to lower funnel, I'm ready to purchase something, is being collapsed, because you don't have to go ask a question, go click on a website, go discover what's going on that website, go back and do this kind of like top of the funnel discovery, and then get retargeted to then go to, middle of, now in consideration phase, and now give me other messaging because I'm in consideration, and then buying. So these steps are getting collapsed quite a bit. And this pulls us into this next topic that we wanted to talk about today, which is what the future of search might look like, where Google has a new patent suggesting, or pending patent, I guess, or
No,
application.
it says it was awarded. It says it was
It
awarded.
was awarded. Oh,
Yeah.
okay. So they've got a new patent suggesting that the company could replace poorly performing websites with AI-generated pages of its own, effectively rewriting the web and the whole web experience based on your queries. So if you have ChatGPT and Anthropic and Perplexity and others that are just providing you the answers that you want right in that moment, what's keeping Google, when you pull in that string, what's keeping Google from just creating an entire user experience where they don't need to point traffic off to any other websites? They just give you what you want. That's ultimately what people want anyway. And there might be some antitrust issues, around that, of course, but so far antitrust issues are not. They're kind of like
Haven't slowed them down.
Because everybody got fired in the DOJ. So who knows what happens at this point? But point being is, technically, Google could very well collapse those steps, use all their data, create a user experience to be able to deliver what you want, all the stuff that we just talked about, so that all these tools are created so that in your discovery, you go, hey, you know what? I do need a new paint on my house. And before you know it, you haven't gone to any other website, and you've got somebody coming over to your house tomorrow to go, paint your house. And they just call it the entire buyer cycle.
Do you think that process will be able to bypass the ratings and reviews that, are generally bad?
No, but I think what it does is it turns Google into like 1-800-Flowers in a way, where they have, like the fulfillment's done at the local level, like the florist, you get your flowers at the local level, but there's one centralized entity that is taking the order, right? Why can't Google do that for just almost every vertical at this point? Or that's what these platforms are going to move towards, regardless.
John's idea about the virtual painting of the house. I mean, somebody could offer that up to all the painters around here, right? Say, who wants me to send this out to Neil's house? They raise their hands, and 3 of them say, okay, I'm in. And then I get to choose from the 3. I mean,
or better yet, John's business is like, hey, I've got 5 people who are buyers right now.
Right.
Yeah. They already told me they're going to buy. So, who wants to bid on these?
The patent describes a system that talks about scoring existing websites and landing pages, and if they fail to reach a certain quality threshold that has multiple signals that determine that score, including behavioral signals, they will substitute a machine-generated page that will draw upon multiple content sources. It could include reviews, images, pricing information, product feeds, Google's entity data. So, in the case of local, there's lots of local business information that Google has, and it creates this intermediary layer between, which Google already is as a gatekeeper. It reinforces that, or becomes even stronger. And instead of your website, you're looking for, best, some product, best, air purifier or something like that. Google decides your website sucks. So they're going to show you this page that has a bunch of product information, product images, reviews, and maybe they'll show competitors, and maybe they'll show ads, like here's other things to
I
consider.
would imagine they would, because that's basically what they do now, is that, if you have a crappy website, you're not going to rank organically. So ultimately, Google's in the business of delivering a good customer experience. That's their main.
Well, their main business is generating ad clicks.
I knew you were going to say that, Greg.
That is the only business Google.
Correct, but they deliver a good customer experience in order to do
as
that.
a means to that end.
100%. But if you just focus on that side of it, let's just say, that's their goal, is to deliver that good customer experience, so that they can serve the ads. then they have to deliver and continue to evolve in a way where they're agnostic as to whether, you know, they point the traffic to one vendor or the other. That vendor just has to be good at delivering. And, you know, if you don't have good reviews, you know, you're not going to be part of the solution there.
In fairness to Google, you know, there's a lot of AI generated content and spam. There's a lot of just questionable stuff going on the internet. And if they are committed to the user experience, I could see that they would say, look, we have more confidence that we can generate something that's going to be trustworthy and better for the user than all these third parties out there.
As long as we have a way to make money doing that.
Well, they totally will make money. It will give them more ad inventory. It's like, you know, AdSense, the old AdSense, which is now the Google Display Network. You put relevant ads on those pages, right? So you're looking for a car. Here's a bunch of inventory of cars, and here's a dealer ad that goes right there, you know?
Yeah. I think there's a couple of things interesting about this. One of them is the backlash against slop, and you know, if Google, it's very hard to not have AI voice when you build something with AI, and people are starting to tune into that. So like if they're rewriting stuff, but they're using that sort of, you know, icky AI voice, like is that problematic? And then it also just raises this kind of slightly dystopian idea about like just-in-time websites. Like, I wonder if there's a website about XYZ and like it gets built literally while you're searching for it, and it looks like it's been there forever, and you know, that kind of thing.
Or it looks generic. And what this does is turn everything into a kind of mediocre gray,
Yes.
you know, all the
This is the-
human creativity and idiosyncratic stuff that was such a part of
Yes.
the early web that people love goes entirely away because everybody's trying to conform to some Google template of what is going to work and get them above the replacement threshold, you know?
Yeah. This is the gray goo issue. And I think we talked about it before, but it's like a real thought experiment about what happens if everything becomes sort of bland.
Luckily, this wasn't a bland conversation.
There-
No, because
It's a big week. There's tons happening in the market. I mean, we didn't even get into the OpenClaw stuff or any of the, you know, agentic advancements that are happening. And I mean, that's like that
Let's leave that for next week because it's important
So we'll do that next week. That like, for example, the guy that created OpenClaw, you know, he sold his company to OpenAI within a couple months of just creating that. So we'll get into that next week. But thanks everybody for listening this week. Great conversation, guys. Always a pleasure. And great week. We'll catch you next time. Thank you.